What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A dangerous amount of coffee and a ton of grit. My name is Tracey, and every week I interview business leaders to share their stories, life lessons, failures, and advice with you. Welcome to Coffee and Grit. What is up to all the difference makers out there? This is Tracey with another episode of Coffee and Grit. And yeah, I am in the hot seat today. I've got the camera facing straight at my face, no guest on the other side of me. And so for regular listeners, you know this is not in my not the normal show. However, I have done two shows by myself, and I've had some great feedback on it, particularly an episode I did, the first episode I had ever done by myself, where we went back and kind of talked about the highlights in big main ideas, big what's the aligned principles that from all the guests that we'd had previous, and figured it's been several episodes since then. I think it's probably been about a good 6 months since we did that episode, and it was probably around August that we did that, and it's a good time to go back through and debrief. So again, anybody that knows me knows that it's all about taking action. And so we've been giving a lot of info. We've had a lot of incredible, amazing guests. And, and again, as I'm sitting across from these people and I'm hearing their stories, some of these people, I know their stories, and even the people that I think I know their story, they kind of blow my mind as we start to dive in. But I'll ask somebody a question and then it's funny, and I have to laugh on this other side because it ties in with something somebody else has said just recently. And I mean, just within a span of a couple episodes, we started off a conversation with these two completely different entrepreneurs that had both got their start as an entrepreneur at, 10, 11, 12 years old, doing a newspaper route. And so it's really interesting how an entrepreneur starts and, in that journey. And this show has always been about, how the origin, how it all started was just me when I started my business, going out and finding other coaches and consultants in my space, finding other entrepreneurs that I saw doing an amazing job, or I saw building an amazing business. And I would invite them to coffee or invite them to sit down for a conversation. And what I was getting out of what they were telling me was changing my life, because I was able to listen to it and hear, one, maybe stories of adversity, stories of understanding that I'm not alone. I'm in this with other people I'm not creating a wheel. There are other people that have gone out and done this before me, and other people that have stumbled along the way as well. And so it was always helpful to hear what other people had encountered. And then sure enough, I would encounter something like that. And I was at least ready and prepared and armed with a potential solution based off of what I had heard other people and how other people had handled it, and, other resources other people had given me. So transitioning that and turning it into the podcast, it's always been about for you, the listeners, sitting back and being able to listen to those stories that, again, stories are data with soul, being able to listen to those stories and hear that message, either of that hope or that strategy, that practical, I can take this and run with it. But here is the big but. When I first started my coaching business, I went out and I started working with a whole bunch of people that I was just meeting, and a lot of these people were amazing, awesome people that read a lot of books and went to the seminars and they did all the things. However, what was kind of happening was they were paralyzed in all of their consumption of content. They wanted to find the right answer, and so they would just consume instead of taking anything and running with it and taking that action forward. They would just consume that content. And now I see that it's been a very common trend is it's great to read. It's great to pour in and always learn, always grow. However, at some point you've got to move off that couch and take that action and try it out. Fail forward fast. That's been kind of a theme of a lot of conversations I've had recently, is fail forward fast. Like, go out there and try it, and if it doesn't work for you, then adjust. When I was young and just learning leadership, I had a mentor that changed my life and changed my perspective. But when he would tell me what to go do and say, I would go out and do and say those things, and it wasn't comfortable. It wasn't me. But going out and doing those things, I learned that. I was able to learn that, and then I was able to take it and adjust it. Unless you go out there and you take these things and you put something into action, you're going to keep tuning in and hearing all the good ideas. And before you know it, you know a whole bunch of stuff, but you have nothing to show for it. And I wanted to, it's funny, the next episode after we had did, and it was called talking to the man in the mirror. It's the very first episode I did by myself, where we went back and debriefed some episodes. The very first episode after that was with my friend Jen McClure, and she was a friend of mine and somebody that I've got to know here locally, and I didn't know all of her story, and she took us deep and shared this really powerful story of her depression and a lot of vulnerabilities. And what was really cool is she's somebody that I had asked to be on this show quite a few times. And, every time I'd run into her, I'd kind of, jab at her, and, we'd laugh, and she'd say that she wasn't ready, or she'd tell me that she was getting ready. And I didn't really understand why it was, that she was holding back or that she wasn't ready yet. And then one day she said, "I'm ready." And once she was ready, she opened up that floodgate. She had that conversation on here. She opened up that vulnerability and shared her story in public for the first time. And then I got a message a few days later that she took that momentum and within 5 days wrote her whole entire book. She wrote a book and then got this book published. So since August, since Jen, this was actually in October that Jen was on, she has written and published a book. Now, I was able to go on vacation back last month in March, and in beginning of this month, in April here, and I took Jen's book with me on this cruise, and it's Wisdom of the Wilderness, or Wilderness from Wisdom. And I'm sorry, Jen, I'm butchering it, but if you look up Jen McClure and something of that nature, Wilderness and Wisdom, I'm telling you what, I remember those two words because she learned it from the wilderness, literally just learned it from life and learned it from her experiences. But the wisdom within this book, it's a 72-page book with the wisdom of a 500-page book. And I sat and it just drew me in. I was sitting on a cruise ship, out bathing in the sun next to a bunch of people, and sitting there with tears rolling down my face because it was very, very vulnerable. But it's a book that I would highly recommend if there's anybody questioning their place on this earth. If there's anybody going through depression, you're going through a dark time where you don't see your worth and your value. Jen was literally burning her belongings because she didn't plan on being here anymore. And so to see that beautiful story unfold and then see her taking action, and she went out and wrote her book, and she's just crushing it in life in general. So it's amazing to see, but it's taking that action. She could have kept putting me off and not getting on the show, or she could have shared her story and then felt like that was good enough. And instead she took that to that next step. So that's just a great way to lean into this show and talk about, there's so many things. I wrote down a few things here on this list because things that have impacted me. And, one, me and Grant were just talking about my brother's episode. There are things that people say, and I think I talked about this on the last recap and talked about Brian Truskowski, how he impacted me on an episode that just kind of, I caught myself and I caught myself on something that my brother talked about, and it was talking about being defensive. And he was talking about how his mentor, when he was a young man, that when his mentor would come to him and tell him or ask him questions, that he'd be defensive or that he would want to prove his point. And that his mentor's biggest lesson to him, or one of his biggest lessons, was don't be defensive. Be ready to listen. Be ready to know that you may not be right. Maybe you are right, but if you're coming off and you're ready to argue that or sell that, or you're coming off as immature, you're coming, and then also you're not hearing the whole perspective. You could be sold that you're right, and you might maybe aren't. And so just always ways to improve. I was catching myself just little things, just nothing serious, but just little conversations with my wife when she'd ask me about something at home, and I'd catch myself being defensive, and I was able to call myself out and catch myself in that moment just from that episode and that conversation. So that's, again, how you can take these conversations and apply it to life. These are stories. And so I'm sure as you're listening to these stories, as you listen to stories that other people tell, you've had something very similar. I know I put myself in people's shoes all the time. So big thing, a couple key principles and lessons. And I'm just going to start right at the beginning. This has been something that almost every guest that I have on has talked about, and it's a matter of understanding who you are. What does make you happy? Me and Lacey Reedy were talking about, and there was a clip where we had said, it's impossible to love others until you learn to love yourself. But what does that who is yourself? And a lot of times we don't take the time to really dig in and understand who we are or what makes us happy. In entrepreneurs, I'm speaking even specifically for you. I hear so many times, or seen so many times, or been asked this, or I've either been asked this question, or I've seen it in like chat groups of what's a great business to start, or how can I make a bunch of money? Well, if that's really hard. Not every business is for you. There might be a great business to make money, but if it doesn't light you up, and you don't have the capacity for it, or you don't get it, you don't want to do it, it's going to get old really, really quickly. You might start off and be really successful. Kevin Saboski talked about this. Kevin Saboski talked about getting in IT and having an IT business, and he grew and became very, very successsul, to the point where he was questioning himself almost of like, what is going on? When is the shoe going to drop? When is this going to end? However, that didn't happen. He continued to have success, but what did happen is he became miserable in what he was doing. He became bitter, and he talked about like coming home and seeing his wife kind of living the dream and taking care of the kids, and getting to do the things that she wanted to do and the things that lit her up, while he's going and just doing this job because it's the thing that makes money. And Kevin's on the same path and same mission I'm on, from the sense of helping entrepreneurs, helping solopreneurs find their purpose and passion within their business, because that is the most important thing. If you don't have a purpose or a passion around it, if you don't have that expertise around it, it's going to get old really, really quickly. And not only that, but it's so much harder to sell. But then again, what are you? What is your business? A couple of weeks ago, I was having lunch with a friend, and as we were sitting and talking, she was telling me about how she was struggling with her business and struggling getting new clients. And so, again, what's your story? A thing when I'm sitting down with my clients, and I reference this all the time, a story is data with soul. So I ask, tell me about your favorite client. And we start digging in, and she doesn't really have a really compelling story for the type of people that she was wanting to work with. And so I kept adjusting and asking more questions, and we kept digging in, and then it came out, and there's a certain group of people that kind of have stumbled upon her by accident. And just one, which led to another, which led to another. So she has these 3 clients that are certain sector, certain type of person. And she starts telling me about the results that they're getting. And it sounds like I can see her starting to light up. And so I asked her the ever important question of, do you like working with these people? And then it came out that she likes working with those people more than the people that she is working with now, or trying to work with. And so sometimes we got to sit down and ask ourselves, because we're driving, we're flying 100 miles an hour. She's building this business, and she's doing all these activities. She's hiring coaches. She's getting into programs. She's putting programs out there. She's marketing herself. She's spending all this time, all these resources, all this money driving in this direction. she's rowing in this direction, and that direction happens to be against the stream. That again, she's got these easy things kind of coming in. Just think if she started leaning in towards those types of people that she actually enjoyed working with, and they were actually coming to her without even marketing it, without even putting any effort into it. And so just by sitting there and being able to ask a few questions, we're able to shift a whole entire perspective of who she is working with, what her services could potentially be, and then how to then go and find more of those people to continue her business, because then we understand her services and the results that she's getting just by the stories of how she's helping this group of people or this certain type of person. We got to dig down and understand again, who are we trying to serve? And I'm going to take a lot of guesswork out of it. Most of the time, we're trying to serve people like us. When I was young, and I really, when you're in high school, do we ever know really what we want to do? I was trying to figure it out, and by the time I boiled it down, I realized I wanted to be one of two things. I either wanted to be a sports journalist or I wanted to be a psychologist. The main reason I want to be a psychologist is because I had been to therapists. I had people that I had sat down with that had helped me through hard times, through my challenges, especially through middle school, early high school. And so I wanted to be in that position to, one, pay it forward, and two, to help other people messed up like myself, other people that were in my types of situations. I know I've shared this story before, so if you've listened before and you've heard this several times, is that I didn't go to school to become a psychologist. I was extremely poor, and going to school that long was not feasible. So I didn't go that route. But now, all these years later, I kind of found my way through sales. That's kind of what made me successful in sales, was sitting back and listening to people, understanding, where they're at in life and what their challenges are, and then understanding how I can serve them. So there's that aspect. But the really fun part got to be when I got into leadership, and then I was finding other people that had literally walked it in my shoes. They were in sales. They were struggling to pay their bills. They had a tough life. Sales is fueled by dysfunction. People often get into sales because it's an easy entry level job, and so you get in there and you find a lot of people that have had some sort of trauma in life. And so as I would sit in leadership, I would have people that would say to me, like, I feel like you understand, or I feel like you've been through this, or I feel like you get it. And I did, because I had been through those similar situations. Because I was able to put myself in their shoes and relate to them, have that empathy, I was able to then help them see how to get and achieve their goals. And so if you've to go back and take that guesswork out of it, is that you're most likely striving through life trying to help other people just like yourself. And so if we can conquer that and get that out of the way right out of the gates, and what kind of people that you like to serve, and that person is very similar to you or people like you, how much easier is it to go out and then find them and have that empathy when you're selling or when you're serving, right? And that's why I say sales is serving at the highest level, because most of the time we're helping other people like ourselves. And hey, I was in the cell phone industry. And so you look at, even in the cell phone industry, you could sell a cell phone to anybody. And so you say, how do you boil down and help people like yourself? Well, you sit and you think about what challenges do I have if I go into a cell phone store, or my mom, my grandma, and you sit and think about those aspects. Then you can have that true empathy and understand the true problems that you're solving. So if you're selling a product where you think, well, I can't drill down to my avatar, you can drill down. You're probably doing what you're doing from some sort of your experience. It's really cool as I sit down with the clients, or even sit down at this other end of this table, and almost every person, as they tell their story, and it started off way over here at the newspaper route, or stumbling around creating a company in Silicon Valley, and in losing that idea to somebody else, that came along and stole the idea from you. Or these entrepreneurs share their stories, and those stories always evolve into how they now are playing a part in serving the world. So the quicker you find out who you are, the quicker you're going to have success. Last week, I was in a marketing mashup for the local chamber here, and I was facilitating this group along with Rob Johnson here from Speakeasy Studios and Wayne Media. And that was my main tip: is when you're marketing yourself, make sure you know who you are and who your people are. And then be consistent. Consistency and persistency. I over the weekend, my little sister graduated college, and it took her, she said, accumulation of 8 years, that over a stretch period of time that it took her to graduate from college. But I was sitting and I was thinking about it yesterday, that she's the first person in our family to graduate from college. And because it's taken a while, it's one of those things that it gets lost on, because it's been happening for a course of time for me. But, I went to community college for a couple of years, and I didn't have that persistency. I didn't have that consistency to stay. I found the first shiny object and I split. My brother was on the show and he talked about the same exact thing. So to have that consistency, shout out. And I'm so proud of my little sister Jaden for continuing to push through, for continuing to do it over and over and over again until she got that degree and she got that job that she was looking for. Right. And so same thing, this podcast, people ask me, just the other day, I had somebody reach out and interview me for a class that he was teaching on podcasting for a school. And he had reached out to me because he had seen this podcast. And my biggest message to him was, again, being consistent. People ask me, how do you get here? How do you have this studio? How are you continuing getting growth and growing the podcast? And again, I just didn't give up. It was very easy to give up. I started 2 months before the pandemic, and took a little break in there in between, as everybody was on lockdown, and then kind of came back. And then got to a point of overwhelm where I had so many episodes because I was doing all the editing and all the things all by myself. And so I had this state of overwhelm. It would have been so easy to just be like, I'm done. In fact, I had that thought that I was going to give up. The problem was I couldn't give up because I was getting, it was my way of marketing. I was creating content and putting it out there on social media, and I was getting people from that. But it was really cool because I was getting guests that were signing up or becoming clients, or that I was working with, or that were sending referrals. And so it really became this piece of my company that became a marketing machine that I couldn't stop it. And people kept reaching out and wanting to become a guest. So I kept the consistency up. I kept doing it. And then all of a sudden, last May, I came to the studio here, and it took a whole, just a whole other jump to what it is now, and getting sponsors, and, the show growing, and the social media exposure that it's getting, the guests and myself even to that point, is incredible. But it would have been easy to give up. I get, people will tell me that have listened to the show from day one, will tell me about how much that I've improved, or hey, here's one. And just talking about, we all look for the easy pill. We always look for the simple way of doing it, but there's no simple way. It takes the consistency of doing it over and over and over again. This podcast has helped me in my speaking career. It's allowed me to continue to practice throughout 2020, in that time period where there was nothing, where you're going out and speaking in public. It allowed me that opportunity to still show up and continue to practice. And so I went, when it came back time to speaking out in public, there was no big hurdle. And then I've I've continued, even with my speaking, continue to practice and get better and just staying consistent in, again, people that have seen me from the beginning have noticed the big difference, the big growth. But what's really cool is an event that I was at a month or two ago, the people that had never seen me speak before talk about how you're a natural. Oh my God, you're amazing. Or these, these things. If they would have seen me 2 years ago, they would have been saying what the other people were saying is like, you've come so far, but it's that consistency. It's doing it over and over again. So it's not enough to just take that action and do it once. It's doing it over and over again. Failing forward fast. Maybe that taking that action isn't for you, right? And it didn't work. That's fine. Get it out of the way and try the next thing. And just stay consistent. When you find what's working for you, stay consistent. Keep doing it. Stay persistent, because things are going to pop up that knock you off the track. A big one, and this is just this whole secret behind being the difference. It's the yeast within the dough that makes everything rise, is the outward mindset. And just even recently with Belinda Ellsworth, having her on the show, I had never met Belinda or had a one-on-one conversation with her. I'd been connected from a friend of mine, and first off, after realizing who Belinda was, researching her afterwards, looking at some of her stuff, I realized I had a legend in the studio, and I'm having this just, conversation, kind of like John LaDuca talking about interviewing legends and these big business moguls, and just kind of being stupid and, and asking dumb questions. But I had asked her, she had talked about being a sales natural at the beginning of the conversation. And I had asked her, what makes you a sales natural? And that's a loaded question. When you don't know somebody, you have no idea if you're about to have somebody that says something so completely different. I guess there's a point to then have a good contentious conversation, or, shake some things out. But she opened right up and said that it was listening and caring. Listening and caring, from the beginning, selling newspapers, she learned as a 12-year-old girl that she could grow her business by listening, by asking questions, by listening to the people, by creating a common bond, but most importantly, by caring. By caring and by doing a good job, and then by asking for referrals, she was able to grow her business and achieve her goals again at 12, and then realize and set herself up for a lifetime of entrepreneurship. And again, it just comes down to that listening and caring. And we've heard it from so many different of our guests. If you want to become a better salesperson, listen in to what our guests are talking about and what our guests are saying as far as how they're building relationships. You will hear that secret, and it's consistent. There's nobody on the show talking about sending out tons of spam emails and over-promising, over-delivering, or having the slickest words to say when. Again, it's just sitting back and asking questions, and then tying into Trey Boland. She talked about when you get feedback, when you ask questions, when you get feedback on your products or services, maybe you missed, maybe you failed, but get that feedback, cry about it, get those emotions out, and then learn from it and adjust. So it's funny because I just mentioned Belinda and Trey, and we talk about the world, and I'll ask you who are you surrounding yourself around. Who are the people that you're getting around? And what's really cool is I've done this show, or as I've worked with really amazing clients, or just continued to grow my network with amazing people, is that if these people end up being connected somehow. And so it was really cool, but I guess not mind-blowing when I got a text message from Trey, who was episode number 105. As soon as episode number 106 with Belinda dropped, she messaged and said, "Belinda Ellsworth, what the heck?" Turns out Belinda is Trey's mom's best friend. Episode 105 to 106, she ended up being her mom's best friend. She grew up with her whole entire life. She sent me a a copy of her original DVD, from several years ago of something that she had listened to. So again, thinking about how the world is and how closely and small connected it is. Who are you surrounding yourself around? That's one that's heavy. If you listen to every guest, they're talking about the people that push them. My brother talks about quite a bit, Muhammad Shatai, and how he kicked his ass and pushed him to become a different person. I talk about my mentors and people that have changed my life, all the people that are on this show, but you might be asking, like, and I get this all the time of like, how do I meet new people? If you don't like the people that you're around, those people aren't inspiring you, they're not inspiring you, they're not motivating you, pushing you. I used to go to these motivational speakers all the time, and I knew this principle that you are who you surround yourself around, but that did me no good because I wasn't going out and finding new people. I was struggling, thinking that the world was actually really small. I surrounded myself with just my work. And so I was my family and my employees. And, that's really tough, especially as a leader, if you're not surrounding yourself around other people that are helping you move and grow. That's been the funnest part about business, is getting out and building and creating it really impactful, meaningful relationships. And so how do you do it? One, going back to that first thing we talked about, discovering who you are, what does bring you joy, what does bring you happiness, what do you enjoy doing, and go out and do those things. One, because you're going to meet people that are like-minded. Two, where are those people at? For me, a process that I took was getting on, especially this was 2020. I met so many people during 2020 during a lockdown, virtually, just using the internet, because that is the greatest resource we have outside of people. We can get on and reach the world through this platform. And so I got on, I used LinkedIn as my platform. Where are your people at, though? I'll talk about LinkedIn all the time, but that might be, Facebook, or where are your people at? I got on LinkedIn. I had got crystal clear on who it was that I wanted to meet. I wanted to meet other coaches and consultants. And so I've reached out to a lot of coaches and consultants, and then I would send just a dialogue. So other than just connecting and hoping and praying, and not, again, hoping and praying, I took the action. I took that next step towards creating a relationship, and I'd send out a message to them. And I'd always include a question, just a short message, thanking them for connecting with me. And then I would shoot a message that said, what makes a great connection for you, or what makes a connection great for you. And that would always open up a dialogue. It'd actually do one of a few things, especially on LinkedIn. When you ask that, it invites a certain sector of people, a good amount of people, to immediately start selling you on what it is exactly that they are looking for, the product or service that they're trying to sell you or gain more clients for. So they're looking for referrals towards. I typically throw those messages away because those people are looking for one thing. And yeah, I could dive in and convert and have conversations and probably get to the real person, but it's just, too long, especially when you're messaging so many people. The people that would come back and they'd be more heartfelt. They would take a minute to answer. They would just talk about they were looking for aligned people, like-minded people that are willing to connect. They were looking to grow and learn from people. They were looking, take their lives to the next level, looking to improve the quality of their relationships. People would come across so many different. I'd come across so many different answers like that. And for me, again, I was looking to connect with people, and I still look to connect with people for so many different reasons, because I do believe in my core that people are our greatest resource, and that as you get to know people, yes, they do open up opportunities for you, right? If you're in a great relationship, you're opening opportunities up for each other. You're able to, if you're getting to know that person, open up relationships and opportunities and make connections to them. And that's what's really cool about a relationship, is you get to know somebody, and how the world gets really connected is you start connecting each other to other people. And so this is a really cool story about how clients and relationships get built. About a year and a half ago, Steve Ziskowski, who, if you're listening to the show, Steve, man, you get a regular shout out on Coffee and Grit. Steve, but that's what happens when you bring so much value. When you bring so much value to people's lives, you constantly get shouted out, right? And so, Steve, you earn every bit of it. So Steve Ziskowski one day drops off a gift for me. He drops off the book Traction to my office. And it was really well timed. It was something that I knew I needed to read, and I wanted to structure my business the right way. And so he drops off this book, and I open up the book, and inside the book, it has a sticker in it because the book belongs to an EOS implementer by the name of Catherine Jewin, who is, if the name sounds familiar, it's because she ended up being a guest here on Coffee and Grit. So I open up this book and I see Catherine Jewin's name. And then the next day, my friend Roger Burnett, who I'm mentioning all names, Roger, Steve, Catherine, they've all been on Coffee and Grit in this 108 episodes. These people have all been difference makers that have been on the show. So Roger Burnett sends me a text message or sends me an email, connects me to Catherine Jewin, says, hey, I want you to meet my friend Catherine. She is a difference maker. I think she'd be a great on the podcast, which she was. Catherine is an amazing human. We ended up doing some work together and for a few months. And then in that time, again, building and strengthening our relationship, she connects me to two of her friends, a few of her friends, but two of them that end up becoming great, strong relationships that lead to big clients, or my two core clients that I had throughout most of last year. So one day, long story short, one day in March, this last month, or month and a half ago now, I got a text message from Doug Moffitt, another awesome, amazing guy, another Coffee and Grit guest. You can listen into the episode. Doug Moffitt sends me a text and asks me how in the world I know Mike Eller, another Coffee and Grit guest, was my client at Populist. And so I tell him how I know Mike and that he's a client and that we're working together and that I've known him for about a year, and asked him how he knows Mike. And turns out he had shared season tickets, hot Detroit Red Wing tickets with Mike. And so he knew Mike quite well. I use this opportunity because when you're talking to somebody, and this is another writer downer or a good lesson to learn, when you're talking to somebody, instead of saying, hey, it'd be nice to get together, take that action and say, hey, let's get together and schedule it. Because if not, you'll be talking again in 7 or 8 months, or at that funeral when you say we shouldn't meet at the next funeral. It will happen. Plan it. So plan it. So I shot Doug a text and said, hey, let's get together for a beer. It's been a while. So we did. So right before, as this story has a point, I swear to God. So right before I'm about to meet Doug texts me and says, hey, I'm meeting up with Roger Burnett right now. Do you mind if he comes with us? And of course not. I haven't seen Roger in a long time. It'd be great to see him. So Roger meets us up. Me, Roger, Doug, we're sitting at this table at the local Becker Brewery down here. And we start talking about Mike Eller and about hockey, because Mike Eller's son, Matt, played hockey and won a national championship at Adrian College. And so we were talking about hockey. We started talking about Matt. Turns out Roger Burnett's son played on the opposing team of Matt Eller in Lake Placid, New York for the national championship. Roger's son's team lost to Matt Eller's team. So to back this up, Roger Burnett ultimately connected me to Catherine Jewin, who Catherine Jewin connected me to Christine Moser, who connected me to Mike Eller and brought me in as a client. Doug Moffitt was connected well to Mike Eller, brought along Roger Burnett to this meeting that we were having. Roger Burnett played in all of this, and it comes down that these three guys sitting in Brighton are connected in this from hockey to business to relationships and friendships. Like, think about how that world. I blew my 15-year-old son's mind when I came home and told him the story. So I knew it was one of those mind-blowing moments. I've met and have some people, again, that are connected, and there's so many stories like that are just mind-blowing. But to think about the degrees of separation. So when you're meeting the right people, they connect you to more people. And Roger in no way connected me to Mike, but it all plays out that even though they don't know each other, it all played out. It all worked out. And we're sitting at a table one day realizing how we're all connected. The world is beautiful like that. And if you go out and you're finding the people, if you know the people that make you happy, here's a better one, go out and be you. Go out and do what makes you happy and be the person that you want to be. Be vulnerable. Share your vulnerable stories. And the people that want to be around you will move closer to you. I've shared a few stories over the last several episodes about the people that don't want to be around who you really are will automatically remove themselves. It happens in business too, by the way. If you create a culture, if you have a culture of people of ownership, if you have a culture of growth, the people that are there that are miserable, that are cancers, that want to suck people down, they will remove themselves very, very quickly because they have nobody to leech onto. They have nobody to thrive off of, and they realize instantly that they are going to stick out like a sore thumb, and that it's not even fun being there. And so it happens. It's actually a really enjoyable thing. There's no reason to pretend to be somebody else to get people to like you if you have to be miserable being that person. That makes sense. I have a friend and a client that would a while back would tell me these stories about how he feared being himself with his friend group because his friends expected him to be this person from high school, and that's not who he was. That's probably never who he ever really was. And so he was having a really hard time coming to terms of being him. And just something to ask yourself, if you are miserable being around the people that you're around most of the time, you only got one life. Life is so short and we never know when it's going to end. That's another common thing that we talk about on this show. We never know when life is going to end. And so why spend that time being someone that you're not? You will go out and you will find the love of your life. You will find new best friends. You will find people that light you up and push you. Just flat out. So entrepreneur DNA, me and Kevin Sabaski talked about this, in our episode, and he had actually mentioned that there is a certain DNA that entrepreneurs have. And I don't doubt it because, again, as I sit and I listen to the guests, there's often very similar things. One, problem solving. Most entrepreneurs and every person that I've had sitting here across from me has found a problem, or they've probably found several problems if they went out and started a business, and they found a way to solve it. And so thinking about and wondering, are you an entrepreneur? I had a person that I know quite well that I've coached for a while, and that actually was a sales guy on one of my teams. And he came to me in a coaching session and asked when I knew that I needed to start a business, or when I knew I was an entrepreneur. And I said, when the voice wouldn't stop, when it got so loud I couldn't ignore it, when I became miserable at my job even though there was no reason I should have been miserable. There was for me there was a bigger calling, and I was dying inside not doing that thing. And as I sit and in whether it's they started off being an entrepreneur because they were delivering newspapers or whatnot, or I think of Adam Klug, who went out and as a young man, 10, 11, 12 years old, he found a way to take over the family farm as far as the leftover fruit that they had. And he found a way to sell the leftover fruit that they had to grocery stores. So instead of throwing it away, he found a way to sell it cheaper to grocery stores so they at least made money. And it solved a problem. It solved a problem for the grocery stores. It solved a problem for his family farm. And this was his teenage years that he's doing this. And so you think about, how do you know if you're an entrepreneur? Are you out there? Are you solving problems? Have you always been someone that's been finding ways to solve those problems? I have an aunt, and I remember her telling me she actually owns a business up in the UP called Irvana's. And so if you're ever, or not in the UP, up in Mackinac Island here in Michigan. And I remember her telling me about how when she was a kid, she was taking jewels from the chandelier, and she was taking them to school and selling jewelry. And she was just finding ways to sell stuff. Oh, somebody, I'm going to kick myself and not remember. Someone was telling me about how they found ways, they'd go out and buy discount candy and then go sell it in schools and make a profit, when they were kids. So just thinking about the different ways and creative ways of problem solving, it's been cool in listening to that origin story. And I guess I get excited to hear that story, but again, it's data with soul. And so as you listen, oftentimes you think, how can I start a business? Listen in to how what people are doing. And it can start just, Joe Stewart started a shop in his garage that they had to get a factory and a warehouse for. So something can grow, and he never intended to be in that business. He got into the t-shirt business, and it was something that he never intended to do. It just ended up unfolding, it literally, and to the point where they ended up having a facility in big equipment. So you can start and really just change your life if you listen to that voice. There was a whole episode with Sean McGraw, and first off, if you hear me say quite a bit, you're either winning or learning in life. And in this episode, I talk about how I'd gotten that phrase from Sean McGraw. Sean had coached my son in football, and he had given this really I always got motivated from his speeches myself, where I'd want to put on a helmet and go out there and run around. And if you listen to this episode, clear eyes, full hearts can't lose. And literally, I couldn't think of a better episode, because I sat here across from this guy and just had the clearest eyes and the fullest heart. And you just could feel that he can't lose. He can't lose. He's living the life of his design dreams, and talking about joy. But a big thing, a big piece he really hammered in on is men. In men spending their whole life learning how to love, and then learning how to live that love out loud. And I see that a lot. And I love having other vulnerable men on here. If you've seen 2 of my episodes where I'm talking by myself, I'm crying, or I've cried in this episode several times. Kim Lango was just on a few couple episodes ago, and she said, I'm trying not to cry. And it's like, go ahead. That's what it's all about. Right. And for me, I want to, I want to be that role model of that strong male that's not afraid to cry and not afraid, not afraid to be vulnerable and wear my heart on my sleeve. And you know what, it might get broken, or somebody might make fun of me or whatever, but again, I'm going to repel the people that I don't want to be around, and I'm going to pull in the people that do want to be around that and do want to be around, what it is that I'm offering. And so, having someone like Sean on, who is this just amazing energy, and just talking about going through that spirituality of getting comfortable loving and then living that love out loud, and finding joy. And I wrote this down. So he's talked about finding joy is, he said, joy is finding purpose in the everyday pain, in finding progress in that pain, and then sharing it. And this ties back into what we've been talking about, as far as taking your experiences, your life, everything you've experienced to this point, even the especially the bad stuff. If you've lived it, if you've been through it, if you've thought about it and you've found a way to make it to the other side, sharing it with other people that are in that moment right now is the best thing you can do to shake yourself out of depression, to feel joy, to really awaken your senses. And I remember listening to this guy, Scott Moorhead, one time. Scott owned this franchise I was a part of, and he talked about his life of how he had chased success. He'd gotten success, and then he was constantly chasing and trying to fill a hole. And he filled that hole with possessions, with cars, with relationships, with with women, with drugs. And he was like trying to fill that hole. And the whole end of his amazing story, it came down to filling that hole, giving back to other people, and changing his life, being able to do that. I'm telling you what, when you can see people light up, that's even for me, the big part of like, it's almost like Christmas time, having people in the studio for the first time, and then putting their content out. And it's like, I wait to hear their reaction. And, I love to see the look on their faces when they walk in here. Or, I love when somebody's really nervous. And then by the end of it, it's like they're just feeling all the energy and talking and forgot that the cameras were even on, and, didn't realize we were in here for even a full hour. And so, but that is like just giving, that is what even fuels me. And I guess even tying back to the beginning keeps me consistent. Yeah, it was a piece that was growing my business, but like, especially as it's gotten more traction on social media, being able to give people that gift, to put a spotlight on them, to be able to share their story, to share their genius, to share their difference, and get it out there in a high level content that Speakeasy does here. And, what Grant helps me put together here. And, taking all that off my plate, but putting out such a rich product and being able to share that is something that feeds my soul and makes my life, gives me joy. I've designed my business. There's lots of things that I don't enjoy doing. And if you listen to the guests, there's lots of things they've got to do that they don't enjoy doing. But when you can spend most of your time doing the things that really light you up and make you happy, it is all the difference in the world that makes getting through all that other shit really, really a lot easier. Speaking of the things that you don't enjoy, my brother had this. He said it the best when he was talking about falling in love with the unpleasant. I love the way he phrased that. And then we went on a string of episodes where I heard that being a reoccurring theme, and it was said in several different forms. But the way my brother said it, falling in love with the unpleasant, it ended up becoming the title of that episode, because it was just kind of that gist of it was the reoccurring theme of that whole entire episode. But there are things that we don't want to do. If you're in sales or you're an entrepreneur, you don't want to pick up the phone and make a call right now. That's very difficult, right? And but you got to understand what's gonna be the most impactful. If we're trying to fail forward fast, if we're trying to learn, we're winning or learning, we've got to go out there and we've got to do the things and we got to take the action. As I work with salespeople and entrepreneurs, they try to send email after email after email, and then they say nobody's responding. The first question I ask, did you try to call them? Have you stopped by and tried to talk to them? No, because that's uncomfortable, right? You gotta fall in love with doing the unpleasant. If you want a life that's rewarding, you've got to make it a habit of falling in love with the unpleasant. I love the story that my brother shared about making a commitment and having the discipline to do push-ups every single day. And he had a set amount of push-ups that he's done every single day. And I he's gonna hate me for this, but I forgot how many years he's been doing this. But it came down to like at the end, as the day's ending, and if he hadn't did the push-ups, he did them in the most, like, the grossest, horrible conditions. He talked about being in a nightclub and the floor being just sticky and gross. And, if you've ever been in any kind of nightclub, you can picture this with me. And I grew up with my brother, who is very, very, like, he's the guy that like will walk out of the bathroom and use his elbow to push the door. Like, he is very germophobic. He's like carries hand sanitizer around with him. Right. So he literally, it is unpleasant for him to drop down on his hands and get his push-ups done in the middle of a nightclub in the sticky floor, and his hands are sticking to the floor as he's doing them. That's very difficult, but it comes down to discipline. And Danny Yeller said this, man. Danny Yeller was another phenomenal guest that just, as I put his YouTube clips out on, or I put his clips out on YouTube and TikTok and Facebook Reels, they just blow up. These wise beyond his years, a ton of wisdom. And this episode is Growth Under Fire, and I strongly recommend it. But he talked about discipline is doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it, and it's something his grandma always talked to him about, playing the piano. And he would sit down for his piano lessons and not want to do them, and his grandma would hold him accountable to doing that thing. And he's now, living this life again where he's doing things, he's pushing them through the uncomfortable, he's doing sales calls, for example. What is it that you're putting off that you know that you need to do right now? go and do it. Just go and do it. Because one, it feels like the weight of the world is lifted off your shoulders. I had something that I was putting off, a big project, in literally, even while I was on vacation, it was like knowing that this was going to be sitting here waiting for me. And so, listen, I'm sitting here and I'm preaching to you guys. I'm telling you what I've learned, but I am also not perfect, and I'm learning along the way. That is even part of my natural selfishness of doing this show. Is I get the front row seat, and I get to learn from these people as well. So for me, again, learning from these people, I had this big task that I'd put off. It was something I didn't want to do. It was something that needed to be done. Nobody else could do it. And I literally had this pain in my stomach. And then when I sat down and did it, it wasn't as hard as what I'd put on and made it out to be. Have you ever done that? Have you ever had something where, whether it was having a tough conversation, you had to fire somebody, you had to go in and crunch numbers, you had to do something that is not something you want to do, and so you put it off, and then when you do it, it just was so much easier than what you thought it was going to be, and then that weight of the world was off your shoulders. Again, I'm stating this out loud and calling my own self out. You falling in love with the unpleasant. Get those things out of the way, because it creates so much more stress as it does sit on your shoulders, and it could just be off your plate. I remember early in leadership, having to terminate people, fire people, and just having this stress and like losing sleep and wanting to throw up in my mouth and having this rock in my stomach. The very first person I had to fire was actually a friend of mine. It was horrible, and it had to be done. There were so many reasons it had to be done, but it was my first one, and I put it off and I put it off and I put it off. I literally worked with him all day long, and it was like he knew, right? It was like he was sitting down and telling me about how he wanted to change and how he wanted to grow and how he needed to take responsibility because he was having a kid, and he needed to change in life. And so he's having this, and then I had to sit down at the very end of the day. I sit and had this conversation with him, and at the end of the day, I pulled him aside and let him go. And it made the situation so much more worse than if I just would have sat down at the very beginning of the day and said, listen, we need to have this conversation. I made it so much more worse by putting it off. And so fall in love with the unpleasant, those things that need to get done, just bite the bullet and get it done. This has been another common one in Tracey Belinsky had talked about this quite a bit, and she opened up our episode with just breathing, just a breathing exercise. And no matter where you're at in life, I swear to you, this works. Just taking deep breaths, whether you're in a situation of anxiety, whether you're in a moment of stress, you have the weight of the world on your shoulders, you are about to perform or speak in public, just taking big, deep breaths and controlling that. And it's even, pushing past pain. I utilize it when I'm at the gym, being able to push through sets or move past a limiting mindset that I'm getting tired. I'm able to use those breaths and just breathe in pain. There was a couple years ago, I was moving, taking apart our old bed, and we're just going to throw it away, and we're moving, long story. Anyways, this bed the frame was so heavy, and it was just a solid wood, and I literally dropped the railing right on my big toe, and it was painful. It was throbbing, and it was literally, it's still to this day, I have an indentation on my toe from where this hit. I thought for sure this toe is broken. But I sat there and immediately, and this sounds crazy, but I immediately caught my breaths, just deep breaths, and stayed in just this meditative state and was able to breathe through the pain, and never had any other issues with it. And obviously, but my toe isn't broke. I can't heal a broken bone or anything else. But to push past that pain, the power of breathing, it's so powerful. And if you want to know more, go back and listen to Tracey's episode as she talks about it. We've probably had Lacey talk about it. There's probably been several people. Dawn Gaden, I know, talks about it from an old school episode. Leaving here last, is we've talked about caring for people, caring about people, but I remember Mary Vance. This was another killer episode, but Mary Vance at the very beginning of her episode was talking about the time that she met Dana White. And she was sharing this story about how she had helped a person and that's just in her heart. And she had shared some supplements and taken care of these people. And they were kind of thinking of how they could help her. And they had offered her a potential opportunity with Dana White. And she didn't know who Dana White was, so much to the fact that she said that she could give Dana White a massage like Dana was a girl or a woman. And she had said something that I thought was really funny. That was at the end of that clip. And she had said that, the people there had at the end realized that Mary had helped them, not realizing who they were, that they were in position of power. And if you go out and you live life that way, if you go out and you give to people, don't worry about being taken advantage of, right? Like you just go out and you give to people, your life will be abundant. And it's really cool through that episode, Mary talked about towards the end about how she is so abundant and she's given all these opportunities and has this life by design. And she's never these opportunities just keep flowing to her. She's never feeling like she's at a lack because she's been able to go out and pour and just give. And it's always you give to get. You hear that saying, and I'm not saying you go out and you give and then you go out and knock on somebody's door and say, remember that time I gave you something, you owe me something. But when you go out and you do just great things for people with a heart of caring and serving, and you have an opportunity to just do nice things, or maybe it's even just thinking of somebody. We talked about how do you build relationships? How do you build upon relationships? How do you create new friendships and find the right people? Relationships take time and they take, going back, consistency. And so you may not earn a friendship right out of the gates, but if you keep sending them, you think of something that they said, or something they said made you think of something, or you like shooting them a text, or you just thinking about, I have this rule and I'm not 100%, but if I've thought about somebody multiple times in a day or two period, I'll shoot them a message and just say, hey, and let them know that I'm thinking about them. No ulterior motives, just something that I've been thinking about them. And it usually leads to then meeting up and getting coffee or getting a drink, or just, meeting at the, whatever, or just having a phone conversation or a Zoom conversation. Relationships take work, they take consistency, they take communication. And again, that's another key tip that you'll learn by listening to the people on the show is we've got some amazing communicators. If you hold in and you don't have these, tough conversations, or you don't have conversations that need to be had, it will deteriorate your relationships. And at some point it will come out, but it will probably be in an explosion. And, you probably have been in that before. So, you know what? Thank you, everybody. I got through it. I got through the hot seat here. Maybe only a couple of edits for Grant, so made him work today. But again, just a cheat sheet and going back, listen to these episodes a little bit deeper. But most importantly, what's the one thing that you can go out and do? What's the one thing that you can shift right now that will make a big difference in your life and your business and your family and your relationships? You choose. Again, it's your life by design. Until next time, thank you everybody for tuning in, and go out and be the freaking difference, everybody.